Good morning, welcome to Wednesday morning's thought for today. As always, we have our prayer meeting online at 7:30 tonight on Zoom. We'd love to see you. We'd also love to pray for you if there's anything that you feel you could ask us to pray for and trust us with this evening. We would like to think we're confidential, and we would like to be able to offer you the opportunity of knowing that people are thinking and praying for you. So please get in touch, and we'd love to see you there this evening. In the meantime, we're looking this morning at Mark 7, verses 24 through to 30, where we meet this Syro-Phoenician woman who shows this remarkable insight into who Jesus was, or just simply a remarkable desperation to try anything to release her daughter from this unclean spirit that we read of that she has. There's this sense within this reading this morning that when we look at it, there's this woman who comes to Jesus, and there's no reason to think that she's being rude or nasty or anyway discourteous, because Jesus replies to her in a way which we feel sounds a wee bit harsh. It doesn't sit well with us. We don't necessarily like what Jesus is saying because, well, mainly because we're reading it in the English. And there's this sense as we read it in the English that Jesus is basically calling this woman a dog. And that's a very blunt way of putting it. It's a horrible way of putting it. But when you read the passage, you'll understand what I'm saying. Maybe you haven't heard this yet. Maybe you didn't hear the sermon a couple of weeks ago. But we read in verse 26 of Mark chapter 4, "Now this woman was a Gentile, a Syro-Phoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, 'Let the children be fed first, for it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs.' But she answered him, 'Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs.'" Now, that's a remarkable passage. Jesus is painting this picture of basically a normal household where there's maybe a family eating around a table, or this idea of children being fed at a table, and there's maybe a dog is in the house as well. And if any of you have dogs, you know very often that they do lie under tables. We used to have a dog that we constantly had to check where he was under a table, because if you stood on him in any way, he would snap at you. So you sat down in fear and trepidation that you might lose an ankle. So there's this idea we know of dogs who very often are under tables. Why are they under tables? Because they know that occasionally things fall from the table. And you know the phrase, when it hits the ground, it goes to the dog immediately, because the dog is claiming it as his or hers, and you don't even go near it. As soon as it hits the ground, it's out of bounds. And so there's this idea that Jesus is painting a very normal picture, but even more so when you think about the children who are eating at a table will drop things most likely a little bit more than adults. And so as the food falls from the table, the dog's underneath the table, and the dog also benefits from it. Now, that's not to say the dog's not going to be fed later on. Most likely the dog will be fed later on, and the dog will get his own food, but he'll also eat the scraps that fall from the table. Maybe because they're tasty, or maybe because it's a lazy way of eating. Just lie down and watch and wait for it to happen. So we all know this picture. We understand what Jesus is saying, and this woman understands as well. But Jesus is paralleling this. He's saying, look, I've come as the Messiah, which you've obviously recognized me as, to the Jewish people. And you need to know that the Messiah comes to the Jewish people. And I'm going to be looking after my own people first. And whatever, would it be wrong for me to take some of the food that I have from the children of Israel, the Jewish people, and give it to the dog on the table? And, parents don't do that. Parents make sure that their children get what they need to eat. And if a bit happens to fall, well, so be it. And Jesus is basically saying, you don't receive any of the teaching I'm going to get. You're not part of this picture. I'm feeding my own children. I'm here to give my own children God's teaching. And the woman has been called this picture of a dog in a sense, because he's saying, if I'm looking after the children of Israel, then the dogs under the table, the others, in other words, the Gentiles, they will get whatever happens to fall. But there's an interesting word here as well that you could almost miss. He says it's not right. Let the children be fed first. And that's interesting to note, that there's this sense that Jesus is saying it's the children of Israel who are going to get this blessing from me first. And for there to be a first, there also must be a second or a third, or certainly something following on after first. And so there's this idea that the Gentiles were going to receive Jesus. And we know that the Gentiles did receive Jesus. We know that how after the day of Pentecost, the doors opened basically, and the disciples were dispersed, and they went into the world basically, and many occasions spoke to Gentiles. Gentiles came to faith, and we today are in a sense a product of that. So the Gentiles were going to get, but Jesus is saying, look, it's not your time. If you get a crumb, well, fair enough, but it's not your time. And she was basically saying, well, that's okay, I'm only after a crumb. But this idea of calling her a dog, it sits badly with us simply because we're thinking more of the word dog as being an insult rather than actually seeing it as part of a picture that Jesus was trying to paint. This idea of the dogs, the Jews very often referred to the Gentiles as dogs, but they were referring to them as the scavenger dogs outside that would maybe be filthy and dirty and would have pulled bits and pieces out of rubbish and all the rest, and maybe at dead carrion, etc. That's not the sort of dog that comes into a house. That's not the sort of dog that lies under a table. That sort of dog is a pet, a family pet. So there's a sense that he's not being as brutal or as harsh as it might seem, but he's simply trying to paint this picture of basically saying, I've come for the Jewish people first. And the woman's basically saying, well, that's okay. I can wait my turn. I understand that. But some stuff's going to fall from the table. Some of those crumbs are going to come my direction. And that's all I need. And there's this wonderful realization in Jesus that this woman's caught on so clearly what he's all about. And he blesses her. And we'll think about that in Thursday and Friday. But this picture of dogs, don't read in it too tightly. Don't be too harsh on Jesus for what he says, but try and understand the big picture of what's going on here, because it's wonderful when you understand it and how he responds to this woman. Happy Wednesday, and we'll see you again, God willing, tomorrow morning. God bless.